Welcome to Bond Park. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Marshall.
And welcome to part 2 of our special 3-part series, Where It All Began. Get it? This is the 3-part series that we are kicking off season 4 of Bond Park Podcast with. Today we're going to hear some interviews we did with VegFest vendors in Waterloo back in spring of 22.
Yeah, on a beautiful day, we met a lot of really nice people and the organizers as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to be talking to the Twitchin' Kitchen magician, local hot sauce maestro, Erik Begg, who's also a punk rock musician and a farmer, and he's got some really great perspective to share on our food choices.
I can listen to Erik Begg talk all day long.
Me too.
Here we go.
Welcome to Bond Park.
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 Melinda's Hot Sauce is quality. We are for those who are past the basic. We're for folks that appreciate flavor just as much as they do heat. From seed to bottle, we focus on important things. Each of our 31 craft pepper sauces begins with the freshest ingredients and the best chili peppers on the planet. This is the Melinda's way. Anyone can strike a match, but few can strike a balance. A balance where heat and flavor find themselves on equal footing. Melinda's Hot Sauce. Set your mouth on flavor. Visit melindas.com to find a store near you.
My name is Jennifer Lee. I have been helping out with the VegFest since last year. As a volunteer I've been helping the main organizer, but I've been pretty involved. I primarily do all the graphics, social media, promos, advertising, as well as some volunteering the day of. I involved myself in VegFest because I had just moved to Waterloo last year, and as a vegan, I found this to be a great opportunity to, help out the community, raise awareness of the lifestyle, and so I saw that they needed help with graphics, and that's my profession, so I decided to help out there, and then it expanded to a bunch of other extra things like putting things together, application forms for vendors, etc. When I was in university, I had taken a course on Japanese culture and history, and one of our projects was to write an essay about absolutely anything about Japanese culture. So I decided to write about their diet. And after doing research, I found that once meat and dairy was introduced from the Western cultures into Japan, their lifespan, started decreasing. It wasn't as long as it used to be. And then I just got into more research on that. I became vegetarian after that. I became pescatarian, so I still ate fish, but I cut out all meats. And then a few years later, I decided to also cut out fish, became a vegetarian. And then 6 months later, I was like, you know what, let's just go all out, drop dairy, dropped eggs. And that wasn't very hard for me because I wasn't really like a big dairy fan anyway. But from then, I was vegan. So it's been 5 years since then. And right now, primarily my reasoning for being a vegan is environmental impact as well as ethical reasons in terms of like animal agriculture. Yeah, my favorite vegan foods actually is just everything that I used to eat before. Nowadays, I think a lot of technologies have allowed us to become really creative in our imitation meats, cheeses, all that stuff. So basically, whatever you used to eat before you were vegan, you could still eat it now. Some places that we go to around here in KW is Copper Branch, and Cafe Pyrus has very flavorful, amazing vegetarian food. Last year we had a full-blown veg fest with 40-something vendors, and we tried to have a wide variety of different businesses. So there were food businesses, there were nonprofit organizations, animal sanctuaries, there were people that were making vegan products like wallets out of leaves instead of leather, all those types of things. And when we had opened up applications for VegFest, a lot of people just applied themselves. I think VegFests are pretty popular these days. They have them in a bunch of different cities across Ontario, across Canada, like all over North America. They're pretty big. So it was very easy to find vendors. A lot of them are looking out to see where the next VegFest will be. But yeah, a lot for today's VegFest at least. Everyone is a local business, so in the Waterloo region, which includes Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo. So today we try to spread out a wide variety in terms of food. So we've got Indian food, pizza, yogurt, donuts, ice cream, and then we have a bunch of free samples on cheeses, sausages, etc. So today's is a focus on local businesses that serve plant-based foods. Today's theme is purely from an environmental aspect. Any type of products that use animal products like leather, dairy, meat, etc. Animal agriculture is one of the top factors of the climate crisis. And so if, some people are passing by asking why we should switch to this sort of lifestyle or even be a flexitarian, right? Like if you wanted to swap out one meal per day or one meal per week, that's still a huge difference you're making. So hopefully people just have to, come by with an open mind, try these things out.
Hi there, I'm Mo Markham, and I've been one of the coordinators for VegFest for the last 5 years. VegFest is put on by Waterloo Region Climate Initiatives, and in the past we've also done it in conjunction with the City of Kitchener. This is our 5th year, and this year we're doing a pop-up, or a couple of pop-ups, and really just wanting people to try plant-based food. For me, it was climate that really affected me. I was vegetarian for many, many years, but I went out west and I tell people I saw climate change. So I used to live in British Columbia and then hadn't been there in 7 years. Seeing what it looked like was just really, I was blown away, and I thought we really need to make change. Just a different experience, right? We watched the planes come and scoop water from the lake to put out the fire. When I flew home, I don't fly anymore, but when I flew home, we were watching more fires roll in from Washington State when we left Vancouver. When we landed in Calgary, we watched, we couldn't see the mountains because of the smoke, right? So I realized that really needed to do something, so that's when I started getting involved politically, and then I went plant-based. And I started doing more work and just helping people to understand the connections between climate and animal agriculture was huge. And it's something that media doesn't want to talk about, governments don't want to talk about it. We're still subsidizing this, the industry that's killing us, right? So that's what got me going. In terms of the plant-based meats and cheeses and things, people, dump on them, but they're a fabulous way for people to transition to plant-based because then they don't feel like they have to give something up. And from a nutritional perspective, they're actually not worse because they don't have the saturated fats and stuff that meats and cheeses would. So, so there are pluses and minuses to them. But from a nutritional perspective overall, they're pretty similar. And but they're a great transition, right? And a lot of people on a plant-based diet are eating whole food plant-based diet, and and that's the healthiest way to go. So Canada Food Guide, scientists all over the world, they all say that this is what's best for us from a planetary perspective and also from a health perspective. It's been about 30 years since I've eaten meat, so it actually smells pretty awful to me, but also because I know I know from a climate perspective what it's meaning, but also that this was someone's life, and that someone who didn't want to die. I think that cravings are one thing, but once you've made a decision, there's so many options out there. And, just reminding yourself why you're doing it, is important. It's, we have so little time to make change. We need to make change ourselves. We also need to push governments and corporations, but also help other people around us to understand the need to make change. That's really important. And if we are eating meat and animal products ourselves, we're not giving people the whole message, right? We're not telling people what's going to help the planet. So
I am James. I'm here at VegFest volunteering. I saw the ad on Instagram, saw that they were looking for some people, and I thought that's a good cause. I want to be part of it, so I came down. It's a very different story than most people. I went vegan the day of a 7-gram mushroom trip with a shaman in Toronto, and I felt all of the pain of the world in my heart and all of the suffering in my stomach of the beings that I never really cared to learn about or know their names or their lived experience. And then that day I said, what can I do to live a little bit differently than I've been living, because how do I hold all of this feeling in my body? And so I decided that day that I would go vegan. It's one of the things that I really love doing is sharing with people delicious food. I know that there's some people out there who might have taken the journey to veganism through a sense of shame or feeling bad about their choices, and so they believe that they need to share with other people that same shame, because that helped them make that transition, that's the way that they shift. But I actually made my shift with, as much as that was a painful experience, a lot of joy. And a lot of hope for the world was in that experience as well. And so now my advocacy is delicious pizza for my family, and being at Thanksgiving dinner amicably and showing up kindly with vegan options for everyone I love. I think it's absolutely normal for salty, fatty foods to make our brains start to salivate. I think that's completely reasonable, and I'm really glad that there's a lot of food scientists out here making that happen. One of my secret ingredients for when I cook actually is to target that part of the brain, which is I use something called Udo's oil, which is a combination of omega-369. It's very lightly flavored, and if I'm making a sauce, like a dipping sauce, I'll put that in it because it's that same sort of make your brain want more, salivating, the same thing you get from a cheese, the same thing you get from a steak or whatever, because those healthy fats are actually evolutionarily we're primed to want those things. And so how can we include those in our foods so that we're getting the nutrients we need, but also that enjoyment? And we can do that, and there's a lot of people working on it.
Okay, ready to go?
Yeah, ready.
Awesome. So my name is Vanilla. I am the daughter of Thiru from Thiru's Gourmet. We've been native to Waterloo since 2000. And so Thiru's Gourmet is kind of like an offshoot from our restaurant Classic Indian, where we're located in North Waterloo. A lot of our customers have loved our brand and the sauces and the soups that we make, so we decided to bottle it so they can kind of recreate those flavors in their own home. When we participate in festivals like these, like VegFest, it's been great for us because there's a stigma around Indian food saying that, it has a lot of butter in it, there's a lot of ghee in it, it's just not healthy for you. We're trying to combat that and be it can be good for you. So our product line, a lot of our cooking sauces are all vegan. Soups, most of them are vegan or vegetarian. So it definitely helps us expand our clientele, but also
challenging the stigma, like I mentioned, that Indian food is unhealthy. Waterloo region has just been so supportive. You know, like we had our first location was in like this little plaza in a residential area, and the fact that it sustained us for like 20 years and allowed us to move to a new location, like that wouldn't have been possible in just like any neighborhood, you know. So Waterloo has been incredible, and I think since the beginning, like since the year 2001, like we've always been able to give back to our community through like Empty Bowls, which is a fundraiser for the food bank. We also have the Zanta International Club where they do International Women's Day every March, so we're able to donate food for that as well, and a lot of other community events, like when university clubs ask if they want food, or colleges or anything, we're always happy to like volunteer our time and our food. It's always a pleasure for us to give back, because we come from, like in South India, from a community that hospitality is huge and the sense of like communal spirit is big, so we're just trying to practice that here in Waterloo region as well. 10 years ago, I was at the University of Waterloo, and I joined a club called Eco Eats, which focused on like sustainable eating. And so for me, I've always been kind of like a tree hugger. So for me, I was like, it was such a quick decision for me to be like, you know what, I need to stop eating meat for the sustainability of the planet. But then I started learning about factory farming, and I was like, okay, yeah, animal byproducts are just not for me. It's just not the right thing to do, especially when I'm someone who's always been like, oh, I love animals. It just didn't seem right, didn't sit right with me. So that's kind of 2012 was when I stopped eating meat, and like kind of I avoid animal byproducts and never look back. Like people are always like, oh, don't you miss meat? And it's like, no, actually in the last 10 years I've seen the advancement of how far, you know, like plant-based foods have come, like whether it's Beyond Meat or like any of these soy foods, even the taste, the texture, like there's no reason for me to go back. And yeah, and so it's something that like I've kind of influenced my dad, so he's kind of like lessened his meat intake, so it's nice to have that influence on him. And even getting him to events like this, I think it's kind of opened his own perspective, and being South Indian, a lot of our food is naturally vegan, which I love, so it was an easy decision to make. It's a learning journey for everyone, and it's just to have an open mind and try new things.
Hi, I'm Erik Begg. I am a pepper farmer. I am a hot sauce crafter with soy sauce. I play in a few punk rock bands. I'm a dad for 4 humans, 10 cats. I am the cat whisperer. I'm also a candidate for Mapleton Municipal Council.
Erik, we've known you for a couple of years now. We obviously love your hot sauce.
Thank you. Please accept my apologies.
Erik, we've known you for a couple of years now. We absolutely love your hot sauce, soy sauce. Pitter Patter is one of my favorites. I learned a while back.
I started off as a vegetarian in 1990. I saw, I heard Dr. James Hansen of NASA addressing the U.S. House of Representatives and laying out his climate findings and the projections of where we were expecting to go if we kept on with the same carbon footprint we had in 1990. And being a young suburban kid in Burlington, that scared the bejesus out of me. And I figured the easiest thing I could do to lower my carbon footprint, aside from putting off buying a car until I was in my mid-30s, but the easiest, lowest hanging fruit was to become a vegetarian. And so I was a vegetarian until 2010, and then I discovered I had some food intolerances. So I cut out eggs, dairy, food coloring, and a few grains, and upgraded to vegan. So it was 20 years veg and like 12 and change of vegan since then.
I have a similar story. I became vegetarian when I was 12 years old, and just recently this year switched to veganism. And I had food intolerances as well, which pushed me. I was just so, that was what Marshall said. He said, you're just so close. You could just take that step. It's not even a leap. You're just so close. And I said, you're right. And that was, yeah. And that was the end of it. And sometimes these discoveries happen as part of learning
one step
how
to
your
the right.
personal health works, what foods are going to irritate you, et cetera. And I've always had trouble with the same things that you're mentioning. So it was really just an easy glide for me. But it seemed like it was out of reach for some reason. And I don't know why I thought that. Because it was just, one day of Marshall saying that, and I had been sort of flirting with it for so long, and for the exact same reasons that you do. I have this sort of famous story where I say, like, I don't like always talking about my food choices, because I don't always want to have the conversation with people. I usually just sort of gloss over it with, I'm just a picky eater, or, I'm vegetarian. I know that's weird or whatever. But now I just say I'm super fun at parties. I am 100% sober, and I can't eat anything that you're going to offer me. And that's where I go.
And that's where it comes in. Yeah. People give the standard diss of, if you talk to a vegan, they're going to mention that they're vegan. but we tend to focus on the things that stand out. And you can't get through any kind of discussion about what kind of meal you're going to have without saying, oh yeah, by the way, I'm vegan. Oh, there he goes again. Vegans always got to talk about being vegan. Well, you've offered to go for lunch at the Keg, and it's up to me to put my hand up because I'm responsible for my own food choices. If we're going someplace where I don't have an option and I happen to mention it, the immediate smackdown is, oh, well, now the vegan's talking about being vegan.
Yes, I am.
But that's the deal. Anytime you make a change in your own life that is somewhat out of the mainstream, then the people who are still in the mainstream have that moment of self-reflection of, well, if you've changed, there must be a reason behind it, and maybe there's something going on with me. And people never like being put on the spot like that. So it's just easier to say, well, vegans are just vegans, than it is to take any self-ownership on that.
Which sounds, it's like the equivalent to me of them saying, don't tell me about what I don't know about. Well, it came up. I don't know.
Yeah,
people feel threatened.
I've just gotten used to it. I get the usual smackdown, often from my parents' generation, of vegan. Well, where do you get your protein? And my mom, bless her heart, usually at Thanksgiving dinner, she would do something like put an entire tin of baked beans into a pot, and there you go. You've got some protein on the side of your plate. Have some baked beans. Baked beans. That's the British lineage right there. But I used to be respectful and give answers, but it's been 30 plus years and I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of being prodded on it. So where do I get my protein? I just say vegetables. Hey, where do you get your fiber? And turn it right around and throw the omnivore on the spot. Well,
fiber you speak? What's this fiber you speak of?
Throw the omnivore on the spot.
Fiber you speak? What's this fiber you speak of?
For me, 22 years ago, seeing the film Earthlings, narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, talking about how we are all species, that's what really kind of nailed it for me when it comes to animal welfare.
Where was my dad was mostly a vegetarian when I was growing up. He was doing it mostly for health reasons. His father died at 50 of a heart attack, and heart disease ran in the Begg side on the males. So he became a vegetarian, a pesco vegetarian. It was impossible for him to get food anywhere, so he picked up eating fish. So for one, I disliked fish, and getting away from it was easy because we had some Captain Highliner 6 nights a week for 15 years. So getting away from that was no problem. But I had pets growing up. I had a girlfriend towards the end of high school whose father owned the Mary Miles slaughterhouse in Burlington. So I heard some stories there. But it's just, we often look at ourselves, and sometimes from a religious basis, we look at ourselves as being an overlay on the planet, where humans are the special soul creatures and everything else is something that belongs to us, that we have quote unquote husbandry of. So we tend to pull ourselves out of the web of the whole ecosystem and pretend that we're just an overlay, rather than a creature with a larynx and a thumb that manage some language or some fancy tools and happen to get to the top of the food chain. So having not been raised in a religious household, I never had that connection where everything belongs to us and we should use it to our heart's content. I always saw it more as us being one more node in the interconnected web of things. And
it's funny you bring up that phrase, animal husbandry. I learned that when I read Temple Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures. Have you ever read this? Or there was a movie made with Claire Danes that's a little more digestible as well. But Temple Grandin invented, because she has autism, she invented this machine that would, out of sort of plywood and pulleys, that would produce pressure on her body when she was feeling overwhelmed and stressed. We have weighted blankets and stuff like that for that now.
I just use stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Just pile more stress on. I'm comfortable, right? I get it, Eric. I get it. But she changed how slaughterhouses were built in the United States, for big and, beef farming, factory farming, and, a whole different ramp system to calm cows. And then this sort of pressure system to calm their bodies before they're slaughtered, doing the best she could with the tools that she had for this. But, that was the first time I had read animal husbandry. I had never heard this before. What a bizarre term.
Yeah, it sounds a little prurient. Animal husbandry. There are some places in the South where that happens.
So, Erik, in talking about land and feeling like we have this sort of possession, I think you probably have a very interesting and intimate look as a pepper farmer. And your hands are in the soil, and you're taking care of these baby plants all the time, and making sure that they produce what you need for your sauce. Like, you have a different relationship with the land than most.
Then I used to have a different relationship when I lived in the city, and I started backyard gardening as a fun hobby, and it got out of hand, and now I'm a pepper farmer. So I respect that anything I'm growing then becomes part of the greater ecosystem around it. So I tend not to cut my grass, because grass is a monocrop with a heavy carbon footprint. It's single-use grass is just crap. So I've got a yard full of pollinators around the field that then, pollinator attractors that then, most people just call them weeds, but I've figured it out, right? They grow there. If I don't pull them out, then I don't have to make a monocrop. I have landscape fabric down instead of chemicals or pesticides. And I have a bit of a challenge every morning where I get out and I walk the full 1,700 plants and pick off and get rid of as many slugs and snails as possible. I'd rather pick them off and throw them on the road and let them run for it than spray pesticide on stuff. Also, being surrounded by these 200-acre Mennonite farms, I have more voles and mice than you can shake a stick at. So that's part of the reason why the cats just show up. And we've got one indoor-outdoor cat. She's not a cat we adopted. Maven showed up in the window sometime in March covered in snow.
I've met Maven on Instagram, I think. I've seen, or Facebook. I've seen posts.
Yeah. Well, we've got 10 of them. She was pregnant and sitting snow-covered in the window, so we gave her some food and eventually brought her inside. But she's our indoor-outdoor cat. The rest of the brood stays inside, but she's outside, and she does a good job at keeping the mouse population down. So that's something where there's an ecosystem that exists in the Garden of Apologies, where I don't need to step in as the human controller and disrupt that with pesticides or fertilizers.
Or cat food for that cat. So much?
Well, some days she's lazy or it's raining and she'll eat a bowl of kibble. But other days she'll show up at the front door with a mouse, and we'll persuade her to eat her mouse outside and ideally not in the hallway, because invariably she leaves a liver and a tail.
Do you not have any dilemma with the idea that, you would have heard many times that the domestic cat is a huge threat to the songbird population? Do you not have any dilemma with the idea that, you would have heard many times that the domestic cat is a huge threat to the songbird population, right? Yeah, and so you must have at some point sorted this all out, that, there's your pets, there's your cats, there's rodents, there's pests, there's slugs, there's snails.
I think it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison, or maybe peppers and carrots, as you stay on top of it. Peppers. But in the city, the cats don't have much of an ecosystem. So any outdoor cat in the city is going to be chasing birds, and there may be small rabbits, but there's not a large mouse population. Out in the country, it's completely different, where most of the cats in the area are ferals, and every barn up and down the road will have 50 cats in a colony. And the reasons we have most of the cats we do, a lot of them were either Humane Society rescues or cats that just showed up. We have a couple of years ago, we had a small kitten living in one of the bushes, and as the snow started to come down, I figured she had a better survival chance inside than outside. So I tackled her with a bath towel and brought her inside, and she was our 7th cat, so we named her Magnificent.
Since 1979, I've had 11 cats. Since 1979, I've had 11 cats in my life that have, most of them have lived to maybe 15, 16, 17, most of them. And they're every bit a mystery to me now as they were when I first met one.
I find that every cat is weird.
What kind of understanding
just for different reasons
have when it comes to cats?
And every cat's got their own neuroses and their own preferences and their own just weird crap that they do, where you just shake your head and say, what's going on with you? So much like humans or any other creature, things have their own personalities. And it's on me to find the way to connect with that creature and find the commonality, the kernel of common interest, or that thing we can connect on. And that's how I bond with the cats. They also have their own social dynamic as well. We have 10 inside right now, and not every cat likes every other cat, but there's their own social dynamic where some will play together, some will give each other nasty glances on the way by in the hallway. But it's the same with like any human connection. Like everyone has their own personality. And I don't draw as much as a differentiator between my human friends as I do with my feline friends.
We touched on this earlier with the cat food, but I've asked Marshall this before because we talk about this subject at great length, and I don't have any pets, but Marshall has these animals in his home. And I said, how do you reconcile with buying the pet food, with buying this?
Yeah. So to give an example, we have 3 cats in our home right now. One's on a hypoallergenic food and one's on urinary tract food, right? All these foods have lots and lots of animal products in them, right? And I'm told by the veterinarian, this is your only option. If your cat does not eat these foods, you're looking at probably another urinary tract infection soon, or an issue with allergies. And these things are all incredibly costly. And so is the cat food, right? So you follow the veterinarian's instructions and everything goes pretty well, so why would you deviate from that? And yet we're trapped in this cycle of buying
the vegetarian or vegan values I have for myself don't necessarily apply to the cats.
Our vegetarian
because we're different creatures with different nutritional needs and different digestive tracts. So in the absence of a good solution, it's honest to choose the one that is the least bad. And for the cats, the least bad option is to get them the food that suits what they're looking for. I've seen a lot of posts, particularly in the KW there's a vegan Facebook group where I tend to stay out of it because anytime I get into a conversation, people start flaming me and yelling at me. But people are trying to raise their cats with a vegan lifestyle. And it's more difficult to take something that has evolved to be carnivorous and force them into a vegan lifestyle. And I hear fairly often from omnivores or carnivore-focused people that the general screed is that you're not really helping by being a vegan or a vegetarian if you're worrying about animal welfare, because factory farming will tear up birds' nests, it'll kill small rodents, and you're killing all these things, and you claim you've got a cruelty-free diet, but you're still killing all these things. And that's an unfortunate byproduct. My answer back, anytime that comments are allowed on posts like that, because they often aren't, my comment back is that the vast majority of the soybeans grown are fed to herd animals, and any meat eater will also be a vegetable eater. So becoming a vegan or vegetarian, it's harm reduction. It's not harm removal, because harm removal is impossible based on the lives we have. But if you are reducing some of the animals that are being consumed, it's impossible to get away from the collateral damage, for lack of a better term, of small animals that are swept up in the factory farming. That's a product of the factory farming, less so of what is being farmed. But reducing the overall effect, I think, is still positive.
So when you speak of cruelty-free, I think about how if you went into a mall right now, there's a store called Body Shop or various stores that like really advertise cruelty-free products.
They're cruelty-free,
but you're saying
but you're getting it in a non-recyclable plastic
There's other
tub.
things, other wreckage, other damage happening.
Have you
for
seen
that
this show?
Cruelty-free product to get to you.
Watch this show. It's like
I don't have a TV.
All right, I'm not a big TV watcher. This one really caught me, and it's more about philosophy and just generally being a good person. And the premise of this show was that no one can get into so-called heaven anymore because buying a tomato isn't just buying a tomato anymore. There's just a lot wrapped up in that, and a lot of poor choices that are wrapped up in that. So this idea that, you try to make good choices, but sometimes they're just the least bad choice is kind of where that goes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And part of that as well, just this is off topic, but I'm a 50-year-old white male Canadian of English descent. I've had my own challenges, but I haven't had some of the systematic challenges that others have. So I like to keep my elbows out and try to make room for anyone who hasn't been given the quote unquote default status and just get waved through on some stuff. So humans or animals, if I've had an easy ride, then I'll get my elbows out for you. Yeah.
I've tried to raise my kids in a way that I talk about, let's try to be as small as possible. You mean?
Yep.
That doesn't mean don't give it your best and have the best career you can make or whatever. But let's just try to be so we drive 2 electric cars in our home, right? Again, not perfect, but quiet, you know what I mean? We take only the property we've been given, you know what I mean? Our food choices have to do with do as little harm as possible. You know, it horrifies me to think there are animals right now as we speak going into a slaughterhouse and they're feeling fear.
Sometimes,
whatever it is
I think it's always said with love, but sometimes you'll say humans have
possibly
been
terrified
shitty
and
to
this
each
stuff
other
just kills
for
me
as
every
long
day.
as humans have existed. Who's speaking up for the animals?
For sure, yeah. So that's probably my big.
All these species.
For sure, yeah. So that's probably my biggest reason for my food choices is the voiceless, right? All these species that can't speak up.
It's our animal nature.
Forever been destructive.
Animals fight for survival. They fight for resources. They don't care about the feelings of the second cat to get to the mouse. It's all survival of the fittest. Humans are a product of that as well. However, we're also self-aware, whereas most animals aren't. So we can understand the consequences of our actions. I've heard it said that humans are just about the only creature that can time travel cerebrally because we remember the past and we can predict the future. So I think that gives us a bit of a responsibility to, as we can understand the effect of what we're doing, we should factor that in and take steps accordingly.
Yeah, I think where I have the biggest problem is it just seems like everything's such an unlevel playing field for when it comes to humans. You know, I can watch a National Geographic show and watch a cheetah take down.
Well, we have
elk,
choices.
It's fascinating, right? But that's a what looks to me to be a pretty natural, even playing field. But we have choices. Yeah, we have choices. And the humans, for some reason,
I think part of it is a lot of our society is just a giant case of Stockholm Syndrome. And we do things the way we do because we've always done them. And no one stops to step back and have that self-reflection. And when the Soviet Union was around, I used to argue with people that, being the mouthy young punk rock kid, of my grandpappy run the war so I could be owned by a corporation instead of by a military. But the practical, tangible freedom that we got in the Western world versus the Eastern Bloc are very similar. I mean, the Soviet Union, you line up, you get bread, but everyone gets bread. In North America, you go down to the grocery store and Galen Weston has price fixed it. So you've got 30 different types of bread that are all basically the same with different pictures on the loaves. And our freedom comes down to Coke or Pepsi or McDonald's or Burger King, but no actual tangible freedom where you can take a few days off work because we are held by chains of debt. And that controls our society to the point that humans don't really have that choice because we've got Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk who are waving their galactic dicks at each other over who gets to fly the biggest penis into space. And you've got people living in their parking lots, living in their cars, working at their facilities. It's my pleasure. It's garden candy. It's an
Erik,
underappreciated
I want to thank you for the
fruit.
ground cherries that you shared with my family this year. They were incredibly prolific and did great.
Yeah, bright orange.
I love the kind of the final color they take.
That's my pleasure.
They go from this kind of golden yellow color to just something a little bit bright orange. Bright orange, yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. That's my pleasure. I'll be looking for them again next year. Yeah, you got it. Erik, can you wrap up here by talking about how you took yourself out of professional life where you were basically at a desk or in an office of some kind or at a counter, right? And you found your way into a a life that looks a lot like freedom.
6-week drought
you know,
this year, and then
soil,
all the tornado walk.
Not that you're not vulnerable to all the
good times,
the weather and the elements and that come with the outdoors.
6-week drought this year.
Yeah, that's right.
All the tornado walk.
Yeah. So yeah, and you have to be imaginative and build greenhouses and that, and at the same time you're making these amazing hot sauces, just awesome. They make so many people like me and Sarah happy. And but they that also comes with its production comes with challenges and possibly more dilemmas when it comes to your choices. You're philosophically thinking about these things all along the way, right? Tell us about where you came from in that way and where you're at
my
now.
two longest careers as an adult.
You've got everything kind of aligned.
I spent 15 years in the banking sector
and
then close to 10 running warehouses. So basically, I lived in a giant aquarium. So a big rectangular space with fluorescent lights and climate control. Well, not necessarily warehouses, but it was a bad environment for developing humans. So I married my wife Nina and took on 4 stepkids, and we bought a place in the suburbs because I had lived downtown and played in bands and done the punk rock thing until my mid-30s. And then suddenly I've got a backyard and I start gardening, because to me it was punk rock direct action food. I can put seeds in the ground, I get free food. But a family of raccoons had other designs on the yard, and they destroyed everything I had except for a ghost pepper. So I made a hot sauce with it. I took it in to a shift at the warehouse I was working at and passed it around. One of the Jamaican guys liked it, so they bought all my sauces, and I started making more. In 2017, we had an opportunity where all of the kids were off at university or college. So we sold the place in Burlington and moved out to Lebanon in Mapleton, just in the middle of nowhere in a Mennonite community, and I started growing more peppers. The idea behind the company is that I want to stay carbon neutral with it, because as much as I enjoy making hot sauce and as much as I want to run my own company, it's unethical for me to create something that is going to do more harm than good. So if I'm just making a new plastic factory, then I ought not to be doing it. But because I can grow my own peppers and my own ground cherries and Amish paste tomatoes and a few other ingredients, it makes it feasible. So we're living mostly off-grid with solar panels. We use wood heat. There's not a natural gas hookup within 15 kilometers of us. And it's a mostly Mennonite community. So a lot of the ingredients I can get come from different farms up and down my road. Things like oranges and mangoes don't grow well in Canada, so I do import some of the ingredients I use. But things like carrots, onions, garlic, maple syrup, it's just local. And that gives me 3 things I like. First, the money stays in the local community. So I'm not buying from a grocery store, and it's not being paid out in dividends to shareholders. It's very, very fresh. So it's better quality than anything else you're going to get. The last batch of beauty sauce I made came with garlic that had been dug up a few hours before I roasted it. So I scrubbed the mud off it and threw it right in the oven. Also, it's got a low carbon footprint. Because if stuff is coming from a kilometer down the road, it's not coming overseas, it's not been flash frozen, so it keeps my energy use down. So as much as I enjoy the artistry in crafting hot sauces with soy sauce, I limit the creativity based on stuff that will be sustainable. A great analogy I can run into is as we're moving into the colder months, I had a discussion last year about this pumpkin spice creamer, and it was non-dairy, and how great this is that it was non-dairy. And I said, well, why didn't you just drink the coffee black? Well, black coffee is no way to save for the... Okay. Fine, okay. I've trolled out of the Facebook group. The point being that the non-dairy creamer that was being used was made from palm oil. And so the Amazon and other places are rapidly being deforested to satisfy the demand for palm oil. We might have 300 orangutans left in the wild, and their habitat is rapidly being destroyed to serve this demand for palm oil. And as much as I support veganism, I look at the greater good. And as I said earlier, in the absence of doing something, in the absence of a good option, choose the one that's least bad. And in this case, where we have billions of dairy cows and 300 orangutan, then choosing a non-dairy option that challenges the 300 remaining orangutan to save the 1 billion dairy cows on a holistic scale does more harm to animals than it saves for the animals. But psychologically, we connect to things that we can see right in front of our faces, and we don't connect well to things that are abstract. So I have to paraphrase Joseph Stalin, a terrible guy, but he had a great quote of one death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is statistics. So once we lose that emotional connection with the big brown dewy eyes of the dairy cow right in our faces, we stop connecting the emotional basis for choosing the greater good. So we use that non-dairy.
Thanks everybody for joining us on part 2 of our special 3-part series, Where It All Began. Join us next week where we're going to be speaking with Mike and Jamie Jack.
Mike Jack is a world record holder. We're going to hear all about that, and they too have some really kind of in-depth insight to share about our food choices.
And also one of our favorite topics, hot sauce.
Yep, see you then.
Bond Park is made possible with the support of the Waterloo Region Community Foundation, the Kitchener Public Library, our local sponsors, and you, our loyal listeners.
We make this show in Sarah's kitchen. If you like it, please rate and subscribe.
That helps us get the word out to more listeners.
The Bond Park theme song is by Alan Lung.